Great, before we get started, very excited to have all of you. My name is Sally Elatta. I am president of Agile Transformation, founder of Agility Health, and very excited to have Felipe Castro with us today. I've been following Felipe for a while and really fell in love with the OKR model and found him to be a thought leader in this space, and especially his interest in the Agile community as well. So as part of our Enabling Business Agility webinar series, I invited Felipe, who also visited us here in Omaha, which was a great visit, to teach us and help us mature in our own OKR development within our company. So Felipe, thank you and welcome to this webinar series. We're very excited to talk with you today. And without further ado, I'll give it to you.
Thanks a lot, Sally. It's a great, thank you for the opportunity for being here. I'm very excited to be doing this together with you. As Sally said, we're going to have Q&A at the end. Okay, so just type your questions. And we're also recording this and we're sending to everyone, okay? So the key issue that we're going to talk about today is that most companies, when they try to do a transformation, they end up using Agile as a delivery mechanism, okay? They use only at the project level. And when that happens, you have what I call delivery agile. Basically, you take the organizational stack of a traditional company, okay? Culture tends to be top-down and command and control. Strategy tends to be static, there's annual planning around big projects. Tactics tends to work with long feedback cycles and big bets. And operations usually use some form of traditional waterfall project management. When you use delivery agile, basically what happens is you replace the bottom layer of the stack with Kanban or Scrum and some experimentation here and there, right? But the rest of the organization remains un-agile. It stays as it was, it doesn't change. And that's, of course, what's preventing companies to succeed. Okay? So instead of delivery agile, companies today need to embrace agility end-to-end. They need this concept of end-to-end agility to transform the whole company, to change into new ways of working, but not just for delivery, not just for software, but end-to-end. And the idea of end-to-end agility is that we replace this old and agile layers of the stack and replace it with iterative, agile ways of working, okay? So instead of having a top-down culture, command and control, we have aligned autonomy. We have teams that align around the outcomes they want to achieve. Strategy is data-driven, is iterative, tests hypothesis. Tactics works with short feedback cycles. And we run experiments in a safe to fail experiment environment where teams can make mistakes, right? So it's by adopting this end-to-end agility is that companies will be able to succeed and compete in a world that's ever faster and ever more digital, okay? But to be able to move to end-to-end agility, we have to reinvent how we plan and align. We have been planning and aligning for the same way for over 100 years, and we have to reinvent that. Okay? One of the problems that most companies have is that they still plan the same way the Soviet Union did. They do a very big, heavy-handed planning process, and they come up with a very detailed, static plan, either for the whole year or even worse, for several years ahead. And that plan is static and doesn't change. And of course, that prevents companies from adapting, from innovating. And that's when you get to the end of the year, the market has changed so fast that the plan doesn't work anymore, right? It's not valid anymore. So the way it usually happens is the senior leadership draft some strategy in forms of strategic objectives. And then from those strategic objectives, they create a set of strategic initiatives, which are basically a set of projects that the teams have to deliver. Okay? The problem is those strategic initiatives are just hypotheses, right? And also, we never measure if those initiatives actually deliver the value that we're expecting. So basically, we don't close the loop. We don't learn here, we don't test it. And then what happens is, especially for the teams, progress is measured by outputs and not outcomes. So the goals for the team become to deliver that specific initiative, that project, to work on that deliverable. And they're disconnected from the actual business value, the business outcome that that project was supposed to achieve. And I love this quote from Marty Kagan from Silicon Valley Product Group. Teams today are often feature factories with little regard for whether features actually solve business problems. And this same problem affects not only teams working in software, but it happens across the board. Marketing teams become content factories where the goal is to deliver another blog post or launch or do another PR event and not to actually move the needle on the metrics that matter. Okay, so HR becomes a factory for new policies, again, without any concern about the actual business problems and delivering value. If you go back to the Agile environment, there's a column missing in any Kanban board, right? We usually, often teams think that when they're done, their job ends. I ship the feature, my job is done. That's not true. We should also measure, hey, did we actually achieve the desired outcome we were looking for? When you have a mindset around outcomes, shipping is just the first step. When you ship something, a project, a feature, a new blog post, that's just the beginning. Then you have to iterate, measure, learn, and improve so you can actually deliver the business outcomes you're expecting.
Hey, Felipe, can I jump in just into that slide and
Sure.
and share a thought here? Because a lot of the folks that follow us obviously are very big into Agile, and it really took me a lot to kind of pause and consider what Felipe was saying here, which is, as we've matured in Agile, we've really gotten better at just delivering output. And I think this column that's missing was really just, it was a big aha for me to say, why don't we measure the outcome at the end of the done column, right? Why aren't we saying, now that it's moved to production, how do we validate with our customers that it's actually what they want? So the simplest idea that I just want to give you is, once you start moving to the OKR method, maybe at the beginning of every demo, before the teams demo the work that they got done, the features, they could actually show their OKRs and their outcomes and start with are there any outcomes that they've achieved? So this was really, I know it's a very simple column add, but it was very profound in that it's a whole missing cycle after done that we've been missing.
Exactly. The fact is that we assume that all the features worked, right? Instead of actually measuring, validating, and experimenting, right? So, but many companies do measure what happens afterwards, right? So what happens when you start to measure those business outcomes? Okay. Well, surprise, surprise. Most ideas fail. When you start to measure business outcomes, what you usually find out is that humans are terrible at predicting what will work. Okay. There's a great article that was published in Harvard Business Review last year, okay, which is called The Surprising Power of Online Experiments. In that article, basically, they show some data around the results about how they measured experiments, the ideas, right? And the first data that we have is in an environment that has not been optimized. That means an environment where you didn't test things yet. I mean, you're beginning, you're learning. And we found out that most ideas fail, okay? So for a non-optimized environment, what happens is, first of all, 1/3 of ideas generate positive results. 1/3 of ideas generates no results, meaning they don't affect the desired metrics. And finally, 1/3 of ideas generate negative results, meaning that they make the metrics worse. If you want something to go up, it goes down, etc. Right? So actually, when you're doing that, you may be launching new features, you may be launching new projects, they're actually hurting you. And you can't know that unless you measure. Okay? And if you go for a more optimized environment, meaning an environment where you already picked up the low-hanging fruit, you already did the basic experimentation, okay? It's even worse, okay? At Google and Bing, only 10 to 20% of experiments generate positive results, okay? And this is a quote from Ron Kohavi. Ron Kohavi is the author of the article. He's the lead of Microsoft's experimentation platform. He says that the vast majority of ideas fail in experiments. And even experts often misjudge which ones will pay off. So as I said before, we humans are terrible at predicting what will work or not. So if you're only thinking about deliverables, if you're only measuring outputs, you may be failing 80% of the time, okay? So we need a new way to plan. We need a way to think about how we plan. We need a new way to work, new tools to think about how we align. And the alternative is OKR, okay? OKR stands for Objectives and Key Results, and it's Silicon Valley's Agile Alignment Framework. OKR is used by companies such as Google, Spotify, Twitter, LinkedIn, Airbnb, Dropbox. And instead of being static, long, heavy, top-down, OKR is simple. It's fast cadence. Usually we work with quarterly planning cycles, but even inside those cycles, we can adjust and learn. And instead of being top-down, OKR is bidirectional. We're going to go through a bit about the core concepts of OKR now, and then I'm going to quickly give an overview about the process, a tool that I created to help you use OKR on a day-to-day basis, okay? So, first of all, OKR has two components, okay? First, the objective, which is a memorable and qualitative description of what we want to achieve. And then we have a set of key results, which are basically how we keep score. They describe the outcomes we want to achieve. We will know that we are successful if those metrics improve, okay? So if those metrics improve, we know we have succeeded, okay? One very important thing is that key results are measurable, okay? They're not subjective, not qualitative. You know just by measuring them if you succeeded or not, okay? And here is one big mindset shift if you're coming from deliverables, if you're coming from Agile or project world. When we say measurable, it's not done, not done. It's actually, there's a metric that is improving somewhere, okay? And there's this great quote from Marissa Mayer. Marissa Mayer used to be a vice president at Google. She went on to be CEO of Yahoo. She has this great quote, which is, if it does not have a number, it's not a key result, okay? So there's a very simple way to say, hey, that's a key result. Yeah, it at least has a number, okay? So here's an example of an OKR. We have an objective, create an awesome customer experience. Yes, your objective can use awesome and similar words, okay? The idea of the objective is to motivate the team so it doesn't have to be boring, okay? And then we have a set of key results. The key results are how we keep score, it's how it shows us if we're succeeding in delivering that awesome customer experience. So in this example, the key results are, we're going to improve Net Promoter Score from X to Y, meaning our customers will be more satisfied and they're going to recommend our product or company to others. We're also going to increase the repurchase rate, meaning our customers are going to buy again from us. And finally, we're going to make this customer more satisfied and make them buy again without spending tons of money, okay? So we're going to maintain the customer acquisition cost at a certain level because we don't want to make customers satisfied by spending tons of money. So it's very common in OKR, we use one key result to balance the others and keep your OKR healthy and sustainable, okay? Christina Woodke, my friend and colleague, she's the author of Radical Focus. She says this fantastic quote, which tends to sound a bit obvious, that key results must be results, right? Key results are not the things you're going to do, they show you delivering results, okay? But the problem is, as Barry O'Reilly, the co-author of Lean Enterprise, says, defining outcomes is hard for most people, right? Because we only work in companies where we are told that we had to define outputs. Very few companies actually ask us to measure the outcomes we want to achieve. We usually just have to show a bunch of things we're doing, all the outputs, all the deliverables, but we don't usually have to think about the outcome. So it's a new way of thinking, okay? So outcome thinking is hard. Lots of people struggle with that. So having a place to park ideas helps with the transition. When you're moving from thinking about outputs to outcomes, usually having a place to park those ideas of deliverables helps. So that's why there's this great analogy that resonates a lot with people, that you can think about having two buckets, okay? In the first bucket, you have your OKRs. You have the outcomes you want to achieve. And in the second bucket, we have activities. Activities are all the things you're going to do. They're outputs. They're the deliverables you're going to, they're the deliverables of your work, okay? So we have to separate OKRs from activities, okay? We have an objectives, we have a key results, and we also have activities, which are what we believe we are going to do to reach our OKR. Projects, tasks, programs, features, stories, epics, etc. Right? So you can park ideas here, right? And then you can think about, hey, what are the outcomes that those activities are going to deliver? Okay, it really helps transitioning from an output mindset to outcomes thinking. So let's talk a little bit about the difference between key results and activities. Okay. Key results, they measure outcomes. They measure the value and the benefits you deliver to your customers or your company. Key results are measurable on a sliding scale, meaning I'm going to increase this from 10 to 20, or I'm going to reduce this from 20 to 15, something like that, right? So you can measure, they are not binary. And activities, on the other hand, activities are outputs. They're your deliverables, tasks, projects, programs, features, epics, initiatives, everything that you're going to do that's associated with achieving team or company level OKRs. Activities are usually binary, either done or not done. Okay, so this usually helps make the distinction between an activity and a key result. And having that conversation around value, I mean, what is the value in that is a big benefit of OKR. Just having that conversation around value. What's important is you should treat activities as experiments, right? They are just means to an end. We're trying to improve with a metric. We're trying to reach a business outcome. And activities are just things we're going to try during the quarter. So you can usually change your activities anytime during the quarter, okay? So coming back to that example, here's an example of some activities that a team might do to reach that OKR. Oh, maybe we could launch a new feature. Maybe we could redesign the customer journey. Oh, maybe we're going to run 3 new experiments. Oh, we also need to develop a new customer engagement metric. Okay, so the idea here is not, this is not a copy of your roadmap. It's not a copy of your project plan. As I said, first of all, this is a place to park ideas. When you have an idea and say, no, that's not a key result, it's an activity, just move it to the second bucket. Really helps people, especially in the beginning. And it's also a way to have those conversations around what your biggest hypothesis for moving the needle, okay? Now, let's talk a little bit about the how. Then the specifics about how to use OKR, how to be successful with OKR. The OKR Cycle is the tool that I created to help you avoid the most common mistakes with OKR, right? The OKR Cycle is simple. It's just 3 steps repeated every quarter. Set, align, and achieve. Basically, every quarter, you're going to go to the OKR Cycle and do set, align, and achieve. Let's quickly go through each one of those steps. Starting with set. The idea in the set step is that we are going to begin with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey would say. Okay? When you have an OKR, your intuition tells you to start with the objective. That's what 99% of people do. They start with the objective. They want to create a cool sentence. And then what happens is they end up writing lots and lots of activities instead of key results, right? That's why I'm going to tell you that you should start with the key results instead. It's counterintuitive, but it's a great way to focus on the outcomes you want to achieve, okay? So the idea is that we are going to work backward. You're going to write your key results first. You're going to think about the outcomes you want to achieve and write your key results first. After you have listed the outcomes you want to achieve, then you can create an objective that will give meaning to that set of outcomes, that set of key results, and that's going to make it engaging and memorable, okay? Again, it's counterintuitive, but write your outcomes first, write down your key results first, and then write your objective. Give it a try. I'll promise it's way easier to focus on outcomes when you do that, okay? One thing that's very important, this is a very important tip, okay? Don't wait for the perfect metric, right? Some people, instead of using what they got, they think that OKRs have to be perfect. So they keep waiting and waiting. Oh, we're going to launch a new project and then we're going to have the perfect set of metrics. You don't need to do that, okay? Don't wait for the perfect metric. Your OKRs are going to be imperfect in the beginning, and that's fine. That's part of the journey. The OKRs, they can be raw. They can be unfinished. It's a metric, it's not perfect, it's an outcome. And then what happens is we are going to evolve. So when we adopt OKR, what we want is we want to take baby steps towards better measurement. Okay? So you're going to work with a simple set of metrics in the beginning, and then in the second quarter is going to be a little bit better, and then it's going to be a little bit better and better and better and better until you finally have a solid set of key results, okay? But in my experience, you never have a set of perfect OKRs, because every time you're facing a new problem, it's pretty likely that you don't have great metrics for that yet, because you're dealing with a new problem, right? Since the problem is new, you usually don't understand it, you never measure that. So that mindset of taking baby steps towards better measurement is crucial. Now, let's go to the second step of the cycle, the align step. The idea in the align step is that we're going to align around the outcomes we want to achieve and not the organizational structure, okay? There's one very common advice, which is that teams and individuals should focus on goals that are key control. The idea is that we have Felipe and Sally. We don't want Sally to say, hey, I didn't reach my OKRs because Felipe did his, okay? We don't want that. But the problem is, every time you tell Felipe and Sally that each one should work on what they can control alone, what happens is you're going to create silos. Because everything that depends on me working together with Sally will not get done, because we were just working in our corner alone, silo. Okay? So instead of telling people to work in silos, what we want is we want them to collaborate. We want them to focus on the outcomes they want to achieve. Okay, so instead of writing only OKRs for marketing, maybe you should focus on the outcomes you want to achieve and get marketing, sales, and engineering working together. Right? Instead of creating OKRs only for your team, you should think about the outcomes you want to achieve and create a shared OKR with another team that will help you drive those metrics. Okay, so the organizational chart is just a temporary solution for a problem. Every org chart is a trade-off decision that senior leadership made. And when you create your OKRs, we go beyond that. Okay. Yes, org charts are important. They are there for a reason. But think about what you want to achieve and not on the little boxes that you have in your org chart. Okay. Again, that's also counterintuitive, but that's how you break down silos. Finally, the third step in the OKR cycle, okay, is the achieve step. The idea in the achieve step is that we're going to create a follow-through cadence. Okay? A very common mistake is that teams treat OKRs as new year resolutions. Something you do once and then you forget about it. Okay? In the US, we would say set it and forget it, which is a term from an infomercial that used to happen a lot in America, right? So the idea in the achieve step is that we're going to create a follow-through cadence using the OKR check-in. The OKR check-in is a weekly ceremony for measuring OKRs. The idea is that weekly, you're going to have a short ceremony where you measure your OKRs and you adjust the activities you're doing to improve those metrics, right? The idea is not to add more meetings and add more ceremonies, but you can merge merge the check-ins with existing ceremonies. You can merge it with the demo or review, and then instead of simply showing code, you can also, or showing deliverables, you can also talk about how the metrics improved since the last time you did a review, okay? And adopting the check-in is crucial for OKR success, right? It's fundamental that you close the loop, right? Remember, we have to measure if the outcomes actually we deliver the outcomes we wanted. We have to close the loop so we can iterate and actually check if we're truly delivering the value we're supposed to deliver, okay? Sally, I hand it to you now.
Thank you, Felipe. I appreciate it. So I think you probably already learned a lot from what Felipe just shared, but I wanted you to know OKRs are hard. We have been using them within our own company for many quarters now. And as he said, you just get better, better, and better every quarter that you do them. So for those of you that don't know me, again, my name is Sally Elatta. I am originally from Sudan. I grew up as a developer and architect, and I became an entrepreneur. And Agility Health is our measurement platform. We're also known for EBA, which is our enterprise business agility model, and agilevideos.com. So what I wanted to share with you, and Felipe, you can go to the next slide, please. What I wanted to share with you here is from an enterprise agility. So Felipe talked a lot about what he called end-to-end agile or end-to-end agility. We refer to that as enterprise agility. There are multiple layers that need to align. So at the basic layer, we have teams. And when you think about teams today, they work on those user stories, they do a demo, and they manage retrospectives at the end. And you can click through the rest of those, Felipe, so they can all show together. Above the team, we have the team of team layer. So those are referred to as programs. Some people call them trains. They're also referred to as, if the team is the squad, then the team of team layer is called the tribe. And then above that layer, there's a portfolio. Some people refer to this portfolio as a value stream. Others call it, I've heard them call it a pillar. Every company has different names, but think about if I have multiple product lines that are all working together towards a common goal, what do I want to name that area? And then above all of them, obviously, there's the enterprise, which is really at the company level, what is it that we're hoping to accomplish? And I'm showing you this here because really what Felipe is talking about is, see that very first column, which is our strategy. As he mentioned, what organizations are doing today is they come up with their strategic intent, and those strategic intent and strategic objectives are probably for the next 2 to 3 years. And then immediately what happens, we shift to the right and we start to go to the work column. So we're done with strategic intent on strategy, and now we're going to our initiatives, our features, our stories. We immediately start to break everything down into work. And the big gap that we end up happening is the rest of that first column, that strategy column, becomes a huge gap. We don't take the strategic intent and break it into themes, and we don't take those strategic themes, which should be one-year goals, and break them down into quarterly outcomes. And those quarterly outcomes are not aligned to the team level goals. So a lot of what we've been teaching our customers lately is, yes, you can definitely use OKRs at the team level, you could just use it at the product level, but can you imagine what happens when you align the whole enterprise around outcomes? Yes, we need the work column, so we need the initiatives, the features, the stories. We do need to demo results at the end of every quarter, at the end of every sprint. But what I'd like you to think about in that results column, I'm not just demoing performance anymore. We're not just demoing output. We're not demoing features delivered or escape defects caught. We're now also demoing outcomes. We're saying what results have we achieved. And that retrospective, which is the growth column that we used to do at the team level, we now do it at the organizational level. And that's why you see that arrow that goes from the top down, from the bottom up, sorry, it says identify and remove obstacles. So teams are going to identify obstacles and issues that are blocking them from achieving outcomes. And those obstacles will really form a backlog at the team level, at the team of team level, at the organizational, at the enterprise. And in the new way of working, in the new world of working, that is the role of managers. Managers and leaders need to own these obstacles and remove them quickly if you want teams to achieve outcomes. So when you look at this picture, at the very left side, there's the arrow that goes top down. It says we want to align and achieve outcomes. In order for us to do that, we need to identify and remove obstacles. It's a two-way street. You don't want to come into this world of OKRs and outcome achievement without at the same time making sure that you're listening to the voice of the teams and raising their obstacles and having managers and leaders remove those obstacles. And I'm emphasizing this point because it's almost every day now that I'm in a strategic meeting with senior leaders and they're all asking, what is the role of the manager? What are we going to do with managers? How will we transition them to Agile? And I always laugh and say, if you saw the number of obstacles that teams are raising and all of the impediments that they have to achieving outcomes, you would know what the role of the manager is. And it's really to focus on that. So the last thing I want to mention here is that this whole process, and I just actually did this last week with a group of leaders that are all from the business side, it actually was very natural for them. They understood it. The idea of going from a 3-year intent to 1-year strategic themes, and then breaking those 1-year strategic themes and outcomes into quarterly, it really made a lot of sense. The biggest struggle is, as Felipe said, they want to go back to deliverables. Even in those quarterly outcomes, everything goes back to a deliverable. So I want to ask Felipe here, because I get this question a lot. Let's say you're working with somebody and they are coming up with, but launching the product is the outcome for me. Moving into the new building and the new office is the outcome, Felipe. What's the question that you train them on thinking about so that they can shift back to an outcome, not to an output?
That's a very, very common question. As I said, you have to have that conversation around value. I mean, what's the value we're trying to achieve, okay? And usually the tool that we use is, okay, let's say you already delivered a feature and you were successful with it. What happened? How did the world change? What positive change did you create by delivering that thing? that you're doing. And then they start having that conversation around, well, if we do this, maybe customer engagement will go up, or maybe employee satisfaction will improve, or we're going to reduce costs, or people are going to use it more. And then they start having that conversation around that. Okay?
Yeah.
It's basically a conversation around the why. I mean, why are we doing that? Okay. Is it because it's a cool idea, or is it because we're trying to achieve an outcome? Usually they know the outcome. In my experience, it's just hidden. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes they have problems in writing it down, but after a while they start having this new way of thinking. It gets easier and easier.
Yeah, exactly. And I agree with you. And I think lots of practice is what makes this easier. We have actually been using the hypothesis statement in some cases, and we find it to be very helpful when you can say that we believe that for persona A, whoever the persona is, achieving the following deliverable or completing the following deliverable will achieve the following outcome measured by the following metric. So sometimes when you know what you're about to do is really an experiment, having people think through what's your hypothesis, who is it that you're trying to solve a problem for, and how will you know that you've succeeded? And I really like even when Felipe said, even if you're moving to a new office, who was the customer of that? Well, the customer of that was my employees. Well, how do I know that this new office move was actually valuable to them? Well, I could probably ask them for a satisfaction rating. And what it really makes you think about is creating these new metrics that confirms that you're actually adding value, whether it's a confidence, a satisfaction, a feedback loop where you're really measuring if that blog post was actually valuable or not, or if that case study that you've published, if anybody read it, if your customer was happy with it. So the other thing that Felipe really also mentioned that was important is that validation of success shouldn't be your opinion. It should be externally validated by either the customers, the employees, the external people. It shouldn't just be my opinion that this thing was really awesome, because that's not external validation. So let's go to the next slide. So this was really good about enterprise alignment. The next slide is to make this practical for you. So one of the experiments that we have been running with multiple customers right now is how do you achieve enterprise alignment? So we have this idea of, it's called the EVR room, the Enterprise Visibility Room. And the Enterprise Visibility Room is really a quarterly process where you have walls that are for demand. They're all built in these big boards that we buy. And the demand wall really says, here's the strategic intent, here are the yearly themes, and here are the quarterly outcomes that we're after. And then the rest of the walls are all capacity. And those capacity walls represent the teams, or the trains, or the tribes that you have, not at the team level. If you're a very, very large organization, it would really be at the portfolio level. If I click down and I'm actually doing this quarterly planning for a portfolio, then my capacity walls would really represent the programs or the trains that are underneath that. So think about, you want to make this relevant. You can't have hundreds of teams laid out on the walls. And really, it's as simple as, if this is my demand and this is what we're hoping to accomplish, you know, business leaders come up and they start to read what the outcomes are that they're trying to accomplish. And then the teams basically raise their hands and say, we think that we would be aligned. We think that that's one that we could work with, but let's negotiate some of these key results with you. And some of the magical things that happened during this quarterly planning is when two teams, as Felipe mentioned, two teams say, well, I think we could work together and swarm around that outcome, even though maybe those two teams normally wouldn't have worked with each other. So when you start to design your organization around those value streams, right, those teams that can come together and collectively accomplish a common goal, it's not just marketing on their own, but it's going to take marketing and sales and the delivery team to work together on making sure that this campaign is successful. That's when it really becomes magical. And to put this into perspective, we usually do this, and this is what we just did recently, is we have this level of planning and alignment. And as Felipe said, it can't be cascading. You don't want the people above to do this and then hand down the OKRs to the next level. You want to bring in both levels at the same time. So I have my portfolio or value stream leaders there, and my team of teams, my product, my program level folks there, and they're aligning around these outcomes, followed by the next, whether you call it PI planning or team of team planning, where the OKRs are then aligned at the team level. So going to the next slide. As we've done this with multiple companies, many of them have said, I love the physical nature of the board and of the walls, but we're also a very digital organization. We're distributed, and we have people all over the world. So within Agility Health, we've now actually built what we call our outcome alignment dashboard, where you see the blue columns, which are what we call the demand columns. The orange columns are the capacity, those are the teams. And then there's also the obstacle, which is red. The obstacles are anything that's blocking or stopping the teams from achieving those outcomes. The most important thing here is all these outcomes are written as OKRs, objectives and key results, and not deliverables. And Felipe has some really good rules around capacity, like how many key results and how many outcomes can a team actually work on in a quarter. So I'll hand it back over to you, Felipe, and then we can start taking some Q&A.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sally. Let's go to the Q&A, okay?
All right, let's go to Q&A. So the first question that we have, let's go to, let me start all the way from the top. We've got some good questions over here. So we have, how should a team define OKRs when the team is still in a product discovery phase, from Philip?
Okay, that's a great question. Even in product discovery, the idea is that you can find what's measurable there, right? Product discovery basically means that you're working in shorter cycles, right? You're working with a prototype, with an MVP, something like that, before actually coding and putting all the work to write a proper product, okay? So the idea is that you can measure, say, how many people actually signed up for something, or how many people actually liked it. In product discovery, usually the numbers are going to be small, right? But you can definitely do that. So you can definitely try to think about the metrics and then ask questions for the customers and then measure and have the short feedback loop.
All right, great. We have another question here from Hussein. When you are getting started with looking at measurable outcomes, there is a challenge of realizing that something we want to measure, sorry, it keeps moving on me, something we want to measure needs to be instrumented. So how do we create an OKR around the outcome that will take a quarter to measure and get a baseline, then look to improve it? Talking about this from a small startup perspective.
That's a great question. Remember, we talked about don't wait for the perfect metric, okay? Use what you got now. You can use a subset of that. You can use a simpler version of that. For example, I work with a large company, Fortune 500 company, and they had an issue. They wanted to track the number of incidents they had in the network, okay? And they said, the problem is part of our incidents are in the system, ServiceNow. Not everybody puts the incidents there. Sometimes they call me, sometimes they mail me, sometimes they text me, they IM me. So I don't have that perfect data. I don't have the perfect metric. And then what we did, I told them was, okay, what you have today, I have the percentage that is in ServiceNow, but I don't know how many we have outside it. I don't care. Start with what you got, start simple, and then take those baby steps towards better measurement. What can you measure now, even if it's imperfect? You can at least see the trend, and that trend will help you as a feedback, okay? And improve that metric over time. Don't wait a whole quarter, especially in an early stage startup, for finding that metric, okay? So look for something simpler, and that will, even if it's not perfect.
We've got Jose who's asking, how many key results is recommended for an Agile team, and how are you recommending to cascade OKRs in an organization?
Okay. First of all, I usually recommend up to 5 key results total for a single team. But remember, that's total. If you can stick to 2 or 3, that would be great. For a product team, probably trying to improve 5 metrics at the same time in a quarter, that may be too much. But consider that 5 is the top limit. And the second question is, how do you cascade? The answer is that in OKR, we don't cascade. The idea in OKR is that we have a bi-directional conversation, meaning the senior leadership gives the strategy and the direction, and then each team looks up and discusses how they can contribute to that, and then they have that conversation with the manager. Sally talked about the role of managers. Managers should give guidance for the teams, but instead of saying do this, give them the problem, and then let the teams draft their OKRs, come up with the basic set of key results they want to focus on, and then have that conversation, and then we can tweak it, adjust it, but it should be bi-directional and not top-down, okay? And it shouldn't be 100% bottom-up either, right? Because that way you don't have alignment. So bi-directional is the key concept here.
Wonderful. So I've got a couple of questions that I'm going to combine. They seem like they were for me. Sally, do you have any radar chart that measures OKRs? And then another question was, what's the relationship between OKRs and Scaled Agile's objectives? So it was an anonymous attendee. So my answer for do we have any radar? We don't have a radar specifically only for OKRs, but what we just added recently is as you start to add key results at the team level and also at the organizational, we're adding quantitative metrics that says what percent of the OKRs have been achieved that you targeted. So overall, are we actually making progress on the OKRs that we targeted or not? Because we think that that's part of the measuring of the performance and the health of the teams, is to what extent have they actually achieved on their OKRs. And in terms of Scaled Agile and OKRs, they're very similar. The only difference is in Scaled Agile, you come up with the features first and the deliverables, and then you backtrack and say, what are the PI objectives? From an OKR perspective, think about you're aligning from a portfolio down to a train level, and you're saying, what is it that we want to achieve? And then all of the deliverables and activities are aligned back. So instead of identifying the key results and the objectives after you've figured out your deliverables, you actually start with the key results first. All right, we got one more question here. How do you do performance appraisals in an OKR-driven organization, Felipe?
Okay, that would require a whole webinar just for that. But the idea in OKR is that OKR should be one input that you're taking into consideration when evaluating someone, right? The idea, instead of having goals be OKRs or goals be part of performance management, is that we have two different sets, two systems, right? One is OKR, which helps you increase overall company and team performance. And another system is performance management. Right? So it'd be one input in how you evaluate and promote someone. The idea is that achieving 80% of your OKRs does not mean that you're going to get 80% of your bonus, right? It depends on 80% of what. You did 80% of something that was very easy or something that was very hard, very important for the company, okay? So that's the short answer.
Okay, let's see additional, there's lots of questions here. What is the best way to create and manage shared OKRs, from Ruben?
Okay, the idea in a shared OKR is that two teams of individuals, they share the same OKR, same objective, same key results, and each one has different activities. The idea is that when I need share an OKR, say with Sally, I talk to Sally and say, hey, Sally, do you want to share an OKR with me or not? And then we have that conversation. And then maybe we identify conflicting priorities. So every time I have a dependency with another team, I have to talk to the other team and solve the dependency, maybe creating a shared OKR, or maybe getting an agreement that they were going to support me. Okay, maybe I can share that, but I can do this little thing here and to help you with your OKR. But the idea is you're going to identify the dependencies, and then you're going to talk to them to solve those dependencies and maybe create a shared OKR with other teams and individuals.
How to achieve, let's see here, where did it just jumped for me? Okay, what would you say to an organization that wants to create business case and feasibility studies before committing to an OKR? Our teams are using the Scrum framework, FYI.
You want them to do a feasibility study before adopting OKR? That's the question?
Yeah, what would you say to an organization that wants to create lengthy business cases and feasibility studies before committing to any key results?
Okay. What I would do is I would take this is a tip from Marty Kagan, by the way. What I would do is I would take old business cases, right, the old feasibility studies, and actually measure how many of them were correct. How many of those feasibility studies actually have been able to predict the future, right? If your company is like most companies, and if they are humans like the rest of us, I bet you have a very low percentage of success predicting the future, right? We humans are terrible in predicting what we work or not. So I would guess that most of the feasibility studies will also fail. I'll start measuring those and say, okay, going to do this. Now let's check. If you add measurement, you probably close the loop, and then you're going to find out if you should be continue doing those lengthy things, or maybe just shorter things that can validate faster.
So we have a couple of questions here that are all related to should OKRs be assigned also at the individual level? So as I had mentioned, we want to see them at the enterprise, portfolio, team of teams, and team level. But some people are asking, do you see value in taking OKRs down at the individual level? I have an opinion on that too, but I'd love to hear yours first, Felipe.
Okay. The idea is that good OKRs follow good outcomes. So depending on the type of work that you do, you can be doing individual-based work or team-based work. Okay. If I work in an individual work setting, I can measure my own outcomes, right? For example, someone who works in sales, yeah, we can measure the outcome that that person delivers. Someone who works in recruiting, we can also measure the outcomes of one individual. If I go to a cross-functional product team or a Scrum team, the outcomes are at the team level.
Yes.
We don't have an outcome at the individual level.
Yeah.
Right? So when you force people to do individual OKRs in a team-based environment, what happens is you end up with a to-do list. And if you're doing Agile, it's quite hard to know what kind of activities I'm going to do 3 months in advance, right? So people end up making up projects, making up things, and you end up having, oh, I have the UX person with one OKR, and then I have the engineers with a second OKR, and then I have the product manager with a third OKR. So instead of having a team, I have a set of individuals moving each one in different directions. Okay. Yeah. So that of course harms alignment. Okay. So what I would do, the answer is it depends. In some environments, it makes sense to have individual OKRs, in some don't. Just follow the outcome. If I don't have an individual outcome, you shouldn't have individual OKRs. And several companies have abandoned individual OKRs, Spotify, Twitter, for that reason.
And I was just going to iterate exactly what Felipe said, is that when you're in a team-based environment, it's already really hard to set outcomes at the team level and have them focus on them. By adding individual-based OKRs, you're just kind of muddying the waters and confusing people. I would say the only thing that matters at the team level wouldn't be OKR, but it could be goals for what skills do I need to learn or where do I need to develop to help the team meet the outcomes that we have targeted for this quarter. So that's helpful. It's very helpful to know that as an individual, maybe there's new skill sets, there's training, there's new capabilities I need to learn so I can help my team achieve their OKRs. But I wouldn't create OKRs at the individual level because I just think it just makes it even more confusing to remember. Yeah,
even if you use OKRs for personal development, I would that can add lots of complexity, especially in the beginning. So use it with caution. Okay.
Yeah.
I recommend keeping it simple, especially in the beginning.
So there's questions here that are related to short-term versus long-term OKRs. Some of the examples that you gave, it would take 6 months to 9 months to a year to achieve those, and that's what we refer as impact OKRs. How do you develop quarterly-based key results when you know that it's going to take a little bit of time to get the final impact that you're looking for?
The idea is that you're going to sort of look for the leading indicators of what you want to do, right? Let's say, for instance, the idea is like the canary in the coal mine, where you have a canary, and if you have fumes coming, etc., the canary is going to pass out or die, and then you know you have a problem, right? So the idea of a lead indicator is something that happens before what you want to achieve, and then it gives you an early feedback loop that you move in the right direction. For example, you have in a sales funnel, you have someone, somebody watched my webinar, and then somebody download something. Those are lead indicators that maybe somebody's trying to buy something from me, right? So find those lead indicators. In engineering, a lead indicator can be the percentage of test coverage, can be a lead indicator of future product quality. User engagement is usually a future lead indicator of repurchase rate or reduction in churn. Try to find those lead indicators, okay? Usually there are several early signs that you're moving in the right direction. That's what you have to find.
Wonderful. And let's just take the last question here before we let everybody go, which is, what have been the biggest obstacles and resistance to adopting the OKR method in your experience? And I could share a little bit of mine as well.
I think that one of the major issues we have is lack of buy-in from senior leadership. Sometimes OKR starts as a grassroots movement, some teams using it here and there, and sometimes senior leadership doesn't want to use OKR. They don't want to change. Sometimes they say, no, this thing is for you, not for us. That's a big sign that it's not going to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for me, I was just going to share that I've actually found, working with some of the business leaders, that they're very excited about OKRs. I think some technology teams are afraid of not being able to achieve the key results, so there's a little bit of fear of not meeting the goals, not meeting the results. There's a fear of those becoming more top-down, not realizing it's just based on intent. This is the intent of what we're hoping to accomplish. So I think that, I've seen that some teams are too afraid of not meeting the goals, and so they kind of reject them, or they say that these don't, that not necessarily, we already have a lot of deliverables we need to get done. And the biggest other threat, I would say, is what Felipe talked about, which is the setting them and forgetting them. Kind of doing it at the beginning of the quarter, coming up with the OKRs, but then never going back to them, not including them in the ceremonies, not including them in the demos, and reviewing them, to where the team at the end of the quarter looks back and says, oh, what were those key results again? So those are the others that I've seen as well. Thank you guys so much. We've received many, many questions. Hopefully we can answer some of them, and we've gotten to some of them during this. Felipe, thank you for your time. Amazing as always to have you with us. And for those of you that are online, we will be sending the recording and the PDF to everybody that registered and attended. Do you have any other final thoughts, Felipe, for them?
No, thanks a lot, Sally. Thanks a lot for all who attended.
All right. Wonderful. Have a wonderful rest of the day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.